Muy buenas, Darks, aquí estamos siguiendo la guía de Metal Gear Solid con Hardy y Tona.
Hello, Darks, muy buenas.
Y bueno, aquí veis que tengo algunas misiones ya hechas. Y es que estuve grabando anteriormente, pero se me corrompió la grabación, no me salió el sonido. Y nada, tengo que volverlas a repetir. Empezaremos por la Extraordinario, la 38 y iremos siguiendo. Las demás sí que ya estarán, pues, por primera vez. Así que si no salen algunas tareas porque ya están completadas, lo dicho, que lo sepáis.
De ahí que hayamos tardado un pelín más en subir estos vídeos. Nos hemos visto obligados a repetirlo.
The man on fire and the floating boy that keeps showing up where they're not welcome. Apparently they were the subjects of some top-secret research conducted by the Kremlin. Unfortunately, that meant our informant drew the attention of the KGB's Directorate S, and they took him out before we could make contact. The good news is he placed a report in a film canister and hid it somewhere in Spookmake Keep. Just before he died, he transmitted VI of the hiding place to us, but the data was cut off partway through. The image is far from clear, but it might provide the clue you need. We'll be analyzing the data further to try to clear it up, but for now, get to Spookmake Keep. The KGB have already dispatched a Spetsnaz squad to retrieve that film canister and cover the whole thing up. Boss, there's no time to waste. Head to Spookmake Keep and use the VI as a clue to find and retrieve that target. Why was Sahelanthropus mobile? How are the man on fire and that kid connected to Skullface's plan? If we can just get that report, we can blow it all wide open. Then we can shake off the last remnants of Skullface and the phantoms he left behind.
Mission accepted. Heading to Afghanistan.
Boss, retrieve the film canister our informant hid in Spookmake Keep before he died. It contains vital information on Skullface's plan. For now, our only clue is the garbled photograph the informant tried to send us before the end. We're working on analyzing the data, but there's no time to wait. A KGB Spetsnaz squad is after the target as well. Boss, go to Spookmake Keep and use the VI to lead you to where the film canister is hidden. It is paramount you retrieve the target before the enemy does. Be careful down there, boss!
Marker placed.
I learned of the vocal cord parasite's existence in literature belonging to the Foundation. It was little more than a theory. The question was, why does only Homo sapiens among all primates have highly developed language? Human versus everything else. The missing link between these was the mystery that gave rise to this theory. I was fascinated by the idea of their existence in the Dene creation myth. The Neo Dene, who first inhabited the world, were insect-like creatures. I came to imagine that those insect-like creatures could be humans living in symbiosis with the vocal cord parasites. But I had not the faintest idea of how I could resurrect them. That is when Skullface came to me. What he offered me was not just assistance with my metallic archaea research. He told me the vocal cord parasites really existed. And not only did they exist, they had already been brought back to life in the modern age. An ancient human cadaver, host to the parasites of the time. Cypher excavated such a cadaver from a permafrost region and isolated the DNA coding of the vocal cord parasites. Naturally, they were long...
He's coming too. Roger that.
Back, but there was an alternate vessel they could use. A relative species of the Pentastomida discovered in China. It had adapted to live in the nasal cavity of animals.
You gonna extract him?
But its genetic sequence showed signs of common ancestry with the vocal cord parasites. But its genetic sequence showed signs of common ancestry with the vocal cord parasites. Ontogenesis, the path of an organism to maturity, is like a roadmap of the phylogenetic evolution of the entire strain. Cypher used this to effect a reverse.
Okay, subject is in.
Parasite and resurrect the vocal cord parasites. They interposed a developmental mechanism to the ontogenetic stage analogous to when the relative species first appeared. The point at which it split from the vocal cord parasites, forcing its evolution down the other path. The vocal cord parasite path. The larvae is produced by the vocal cord parasites. Reborn. I do not know in detail how Cypher accomplished this, but clearly they have access to high-level genetic technologies. Skullface said it was the work of a genius woman scientist, and that the relative species in question was first discovered by a group once called the Philosophers. I was tasked with modifying the resurrected parasites. He charged me with 2 demands. First, to add lethality to these organisms that had once lived in peace with man, by unleashing the larvae's latent desire to consume nutrients from the host's lung tissue, making them eat and eat until the lungs were destroyed. Second, to have both male and female inhabit the same host and copulate then and there, only when exposed to specific pronunciations continuously over an extended time. What he would do to Destiny if I failed. I had no choice. Originally, the ultimate objective of the ethnic cleansing parasite project was the identification of not only languages, but of actual cultures. Language is deeply connected to ethnicity.
Boss, we fully decrypted the VI data. Now the target's hiding place should be clear as day. Check your iDroid.
Between those ethnic groups is by no means rare. If the cleanser parasites were to be a deterrent against ethnic conflict, they had to distinguish between groups using means other than pure language. The original plan called for this to be achieved by differences in the transmission vector. Each ethnic group has different lifestyle, customs, and eating habits.
Bueno, Darks, pues ya vemos, en esta zona no puedo poner los cassettes, ya que no paran de cortárnoslo, así que los quitamos y seguimos comentando. Ya veis que he utilizado diferentes versiones del puño, que es el rocket, que es el puñetazo aturdidor, corriendo. Esta es una misión que tenemos que empezar desde la izquierda, desde arriba a la izquierda, para rescatar al primero que tenemos que hacer de las tareas y coger. Lo que no se puede hacer es venir antes que lleguen los refuerzos, que es otra de las tareas. Hay que volverla a repetir la partida una vez la tengamos. Y aparte de eso, tenemos que coger a un buitre.
Un animal especial.
Un animal especial.
Mola la cacería.
Un buitre leonado. Está por la fortaleza esta.
He's coming too. Roger that.
Los rocket punch, y fallo, pero bueno.
God damn it. Lo bueno que no te oyen aquí con la tormenta. No me había dado a pensar utilizar esto, el uso este de nocturno con la tormenta.
Sí, de hecho cuando te lo mejoras bastante se ve mucho, ¿eh? Se ve muy bien. Es muy recomendable usarlo. Uy. Tiene casco este.
No se le ve. LOL. Sí que le enrolla el juego clarísimamente, ¿no? Ahí.
Después también estoy eliminando a todos los de esta zona. Mira, aquí tenemos la película que hemos visto. Que de hecho es tan pequeño que tenemos que venir con las gafas para encontrarlo más fácilmente. Y después, como os estáis fijando, estoy limpiando toda la zona porque otra de las tareas es conseguir capturar la fortaleza esta. Es decir, silenciarlos a todos para que nos ponga el capture.
Eso de outpost capture.
Sí.
Me encanta eso del puñetazo, tío.
Pues yo lo he usado poco en el modo historia,
Yo también, pero mola mucho. Las pocas veces que lo he usado.
Y me estoy dando cuenta que va muy, pero que muy bien. Y esta cosa que me he puesto, el Noctacin.
¿Qué es? Noctocianin.
Noctocianin, sí. Esto sirve para detectar que hay enemigos en la zona.
¡Hostia!
Aquí tenemos al buitre, que le he disparado antes. Leonado.
Dios, cómo ha gritado.
Y bueno, como os hemos dicho antes, como esta misión ya la había completado, pues no me están saltando las tareas en pantalla. Por el fallo ese que hemos comentado. Pero bueno. Estoy haciéndolo tal cual como lo jugué antes. Estos otros no los recuerdo, ¿eh? No me salieron.
Salían más atrás.
Creo que completé la otra más rápido.
Sí, porque estaban abajo de la carretera. Yo los encontré mucho más adelante de la carretera.
Saliendo,
en el cruce que había. No, viniendo hacia aquí. Los atropellé con el coche.
The Killer. Bueno.
Me parece que no los maté, los dejé moribundos. Me los llevé luego con el...
¿Veis? Solo quedaría el de asegurar, el de conseguir el rollo antes de que lleguen los refuerzos. Pero eso es imposible porque primero hemos rescatado que está arriba en la izquierda.
Te obliga a repetir la misión.
Sí.
Bueno, rejugabilidad.
Ahora escaparemos con el caballo y ya estará.
Good job.
Es decir, que os tenéis que quedar hasta el final porque esta misión nos da assets muy importantes sobre la historia. Hombre, son muy importantes, voy a decir. Explican muy bien cómo lo que le pasa a Ellie, lo del niño, sobre todo de Psychomantis.
Vamos, lo que en un antiguo Metal Gear hubiese sido un vídeo, aquí es un cassette. Me encanta.
Y nada, una S, Foxhound, muy bien. Hemos conseguido alguna S también. Últimamente veo que me están dando muchos. Y por cierto, si repetís una misión que ya tengáis pasada, salen más aún S. Por eso de aquí que me están dando tantas S.
Joder, vamos, incita a repetirlas.
Sí, de hecho sí. De hecho se hace el juego muy largo por la rejugabilidad que tiene.
Una cantidad de soldados.
Sí, es que ahora con el agujero de gusano los extraigo todos fácilmente.
Ya, sin preocuparte de que haya techo, ni mal tiempo, ni nada.
Lo único que los pueden oír. Y bueno, ahora como os he dicho, vamos a poner los reportes estos que son muy importantes. Venga, nos
Hasta la vista.
Looks like he was a test subject in clinical experiments. The Soviets called him the Third Boy. The Third Boy was brought to a lab on the outskirts of Moscow from Czechoslovakia, after which he was due to be sent to a research center in Leningrad, then Siberia, and finally an academic town in Novosibirsk. It doesn't appear that the researchers witnessed the talents we've seen from him, but nevertheless he was quite the popular subject. His latent cognitive abilities suddenly awoke en route to Moscow. According to the report, the Third Boy was easily influenced by other individuals' biofields. Evil thoughts, in particular. They affected his mind like a virus. Extreme anger or resentment, motives for revenge, in other words. Now, during the transport flight to Moscow, the boy was exposed to a powerful mental energy field coming from a certain individual. Ever since, being conscious of his powers, he's become a sort of energy generator. What's unique about him is the way his acute telepathic abilities get taken over by another person's will. The boy began to physically parasitize individuals experiencing extreme anger and codify the host's desires. This includes amplifying the host's natural strengths. Or, in accordance with the host's desires, he can also implant program code in another individual, making them a puppet, essentially. Human neural synapses transmit weak electrical currents between neurons. These electrical currents, though at a level difficult to observe, warp the magnetic field outside the body. The Third Boy is able to pick up these weak fluctuations. Contrary to psychotronics, which involves controlling the human mind, his abilities as a receptor are too high. The emotions he picks up from another individual are amplified and unleashed into his body as they recur in his brain. They turn into microwaves, which then affect the physical world, triggering paranormal phenomena like the spontaneous combustion of organic matter or psychokinesis, moving an object without touching it. There's one other thing. While he's parasitizing a host, the boy's ego gets shut away, allowing the will of the host to take control of his powers, like some annoying static drowning out your own voice. That means he isn't responsible for what's been happening. Somebody's extreme anger has manifested through the Third Boy's powers in ways none of us could have predicted, which would mean this was going on somewhere around us. Looking back on it, a lot of things make sense now. The man on fire, Sahelanthropus, they both came to life thanks to the Third Boy's powers. Everything has been happening through him as a catalyst. We first saw him in the hospital on Cyprus. The boy parasitizing the man on fire's desire for revenge gave him his new abilities in return. He next appeared at the Hamid Fighters Fort where the honeybee was hidden. There, the boy parasitized Skullface's vengeful mind. He controlled Sahelanthropus, making it do whatever Skullface wanted. Same goes for when we extracted Emmerich onto the chopper. When he appeared at the Devil's House in Central Africa, Skullface's will controlled the man on fire via the Third Boy's powers. Everything is clear up to this point. But even the informant couldn't pinpoint who the host was in the cave within Surat power plant. Sahelanthropus suddenly became active, then crushed not only the man on fire, but Skullface as well. Surely neither of them could have been the host. Who else was at that location and bore anger more extreme than either of them? Whose will was controlling Sahelanthropus? According to the report, emotions transmitted in children's brains affect the surrounding magnetic field more strongly. Cerebral nerves are covered with insulation called myelin sheaths to increase impulse speed. The reason for this leakage has to do with the fact that children's myelin sheaths are still developing. So, how many children do you remember being there? Children with a burning desire for revenge and bearing a grudge against you. I can think of only one. Eli. We don't know what kind of life he's had, but the resentment he's shown toward adults is nothing short of extraordinary. The Third Boy resonated with Eli's mind. And that means Eli bore the strongest animosity of all individuals within the boy's reception range, estimated to be a 3-mile radius, beating out even Volgan and Skullface. The third boy has probably remained hooked on Eli's anger since. You remember at the Devil's House, the third boy showed an interest in Shabani? That must have been his ego making a rare appearance. He may possess abilities far beyond anyone else in the world, but he's still a kid. Maybe them both being kids was enough to bring them together. And if so, maybe with Eli, he isn't feeding off him, but acting in symbiosis with him. So what kickstarted the third boy's powers? If we look at the location and time that his plane went down, we can make a pretty good guess. When the plane experienced the first anomaly, it gave an accurate report of its position to a control tower, due north of the Black Sea, 125 miles east of Kiev. Dead south on the Black Sea is Cyprus's Green Line. So the plane's position was directly north of the hospital where you'd been asleep for 9 years. And this anomaly was reported at exactly the same time that you woke up. The plane was enveloped in flame from the inside out. The fuselage burnt to ashes. There were no survivors, at least not publicly admitted. Your thoughts formed a synchronicity with the boy's psyche and were amplified inside his brain. That would have been more than enough to trigger his abilities. Your rage was like a big bang in his head, blowing the lid off his powers. The boy was then secretly moved to the lab outside of Moscow where Volgin was comatose. There, Volgin's thoughts resonated with the boy and he was awakened. Volgin became the man on fire, hell-bent on getting revenge on you. His instincts led him straight to you. Skullface knew Volgin from Operation Snake Eater, or perhaps from even before. Monitoring this pair of extraordinaries, he discovered the hospital and sent his assassin and XOF. Skullface was probably watching the situation from close by. Then, realizing how useful these two test subjects could be, he approached them. Reacting to Skullface's thirst for revenge, this time the boy let Skullface's will control Volgin. Volgin, at times driven by personal revenge, at times through Skullface's will, kept on moving, though his body was little more than dead meat. Perhaps there were moments where even your thoughts affected him as well. But without the boy's power, it was like the plug had been pulled from the socket. Everything was powered by anger, malice, revenge. This is how the end of the report sums things up. Both the third boy and the man on fire were originally test subjects of paranormal research for military applications, like telekinetically controlling the leader of an enemy nation and making him launch a nuke, or stopping the heart of someone on the wrong side of the Berlin Wall, experimenting with latent human abilities. They were used as tools of the Cold War. The boy's only crime was being born with unique gifts. But he was sacrificed on the altar of war. His life reduced to slavery under other people's wills. Turned into a living weapon with no will of his own. And eventually the only emotion he could feel must have been the desire to get revenge for the hand he'd been dealt. Boss, it's you that awakened the boy's powers. But there's more to it than that. I guess the anger emanating from you was something he could truly relate to.